Friends, imagine being just 14 years old, asleep in your own bed, when suddenly a man with a knife drags you into the night, threatening to kill your family if you scream. This isn't fiction. This really happened to Elizabeth Smart. For 9 months, she was held captive. But what she did to survive will shock you. This is her story. Friends, imagine this: a loving family, a safe home, and a quiet night. It's 2002, Salt Lake City, Utah. 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was a bright, talented, sweet girl. Her smile lit up her entire home. That night, she was sleeping, peacefully in her bedroom, next to her younger sister, Mary Catherine. Her parents and siblings were also fast asleep in the house. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. But sometimes, life can change in a single moment. Around 2 a.m., a man quietly slipped into the Smart family's home. His name was Brian David Mitchell. In his hand was a sharp knife, and in his eyes, something dark, dangerous. He crept into the bedroom and stood over Elizabeth's bed. Leaning close to her ear, he whispered in a chilling voice, "Get up and come with me. If you scream, I'll kill your family." Now just think for a second. What would it feel like for a 14-year-old girl to wake up to that? A strange man with a knife, threatening the lives of the people she loved most. Elizabeth froze in terror. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But fear held her in place. Mitchell grabbed her arm, pressed the knife closer, and forced her out of bed. Mary Catherine, her little sister, saw everything. But she was so terrified she couldn't move, couldn't shout, couldn't even breathe properly. She just pulled the covers over her head, praying that if she stayed quiet, the man wouldn't hurt her or her family. The rest of the family slept on, unaware that their daughter was being stolen away right under their roof. By the time the sun rose, Elizabeth was gone. Her parents panicked, searching every corner of the house and yard, but there was no trace of her. Fear set in. Something was very, very wrong. When the police arrived, at first they thought maybe Elizabeth had run away, or perhaps left with someone she knew. But later, when Mary Catherine finally gathered enough courage to speak, she said, "A man came. He took Elizabeth. His name was Emmanuel." That single word, Emmanuel, was the only clue. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell them this wasn't a runaway case. This was an abduction. Friends, in just one night, a safe home, a perfect family, and an innocent 14-year-old girl's world had shattered. Elizabeth's life was about to turn into a nightmare. Friends, after being taken from her safe, warm bedroom, Elizabeth Smart was forced to walk into the cold mountains of Utah. Her kidnapper, Brian David Mitchell, led her through the darkness with a knife in his hand. Elizabeth didn't know where she was going, only that her life was hanging by a thread. Eventually, they reached a hidden campsite deep in the woods, and there, waiting for them, was a woman, Wanda Barzee. At first, Elizabeth might have thought, maybe this woman will help me. Maybe she will protect me. But no, Wanda was not there to save her. She was Mitchell's partner, his supporter, and just as dangerous as he was. Mitchell wasn't just a kidnapper. In his mind, he was something far stranger. He called himself a prophet, chosen by God. He believed Elizabeth had been brought into his life to be his spiritual wife. Can you imagine? A grown man with twisted beliefs trying to convince a 14-year-old girl that she was meant to belong to him. The rules in Mitchell's world were terrifying. Elizabeth was not allowed to leave the campsite. She wasn't even allowed to use her real name. He tried to strip away her identity, telling her she had to take on a holy name, a new identity in his so-called religion. Wanda Barzee played the role of enforcer, controlling when Elizabeth could eat, punishing her if she disobeyed, and constantly reinforcing Mitchell's twisted commands. For Elizabeth, every single day was like walking on the edge of a cliff. One wrong move could cost her life. Mitchell would threaten her constantly. If you ever try to escape, I'll kill you, and then I'll go kill your family." Those words haunted her. But here's what's incredible. Even at just 14 years old, Elizabeth's willpower was stronger than Mitchell realized. On the outside, she appeared obedient. She listened to him, followed his rules, and played the role he forced on her. But on the inside, she made a decision. "I will survive this. No matter what happens, I will survive." At night, lying awake in that dirty, cold camp, she thought about her family. She imagined her parents' faces, her siblings' laughter. She prayed silently, holding on to the hope that one day she'd see them again. Friends, Elizabeth had been dragged into the kidnappers' twisted world, but even in the darkest moments she carried a light inside her, the determination to live. Friends, while Elizabeth was trapped in those mountains, her family's world had completely collapsed. Imagine waking up one morning and finding your child's bed empty. That's what happened to Ed and Lois Smart. Their 14-year-old daughter was gone without a trace. Panic spread instantly. The family searched the entire house, the yard, the neighborhood, calling Elizabeth's name over and over. But there was no answer. That's when the police were called. At first, officers thought maybe Elizabeth had run away, but her parents knew their daughter. She wasn't the type to leave in the middle of the night. Then came the moment that changed. The investigation. Elizabeth's younger sister, Mary Catherine, finally spoke up. Through tears and fear, she told them what she had seen that night. A man came. He took Elizabeth. His name was Emmanuel. That single clue lit a spark. Emmanuel. It wasn't much, but it was something. Detectives started searching for anyone by that name connected to the family. Flyers went up across Utah with Elizabeth's smiling face. The word "missing" written in bold. Her photo was on every TV station, in every newspaper. The entire country watched as the search for Elizabeth Smart began. Volunteers flooded in. Hundreds of people combed the mountains, searching for footprints, pieces of clothing, anything. But day after day, nothing turned up. The frustration grew, the fear deepened, and the clock was ticking. For the Smart family, every hour felt like torture. They held the press conferences pleading with the public. "Please, if anyone has seen Elizabeth, bring her home." Her father, Ed Smart, stood before cameras, his voice cracking with emotion, begging for his daughter's life. Her mother clutched on to hope, refusing to give up. But weeks turned into months, and still there was silence. Rumors spread. Some people cruelly suggested that Elizabeth might never come back. Others whispered that maybe she had left willingly, a thought that broke her family's hearts. And yet, through all the despair, the Smarts never stopped searching. Mary Catherine's memory of Emmanuel became their anchor. Somewhere out there, they believed, was a man who had stolen their daughter, and they would not rest until she was found. Friends, while Elizabeth struggled to survive in captivity, her family fought an equally painful battle on the outside, against time, against doubt, and against the fear of losing her forever. Friends, while the world searched for her, Elizabeth Smart was living through a nightmare that most of us can't even imagine. Hidden away in the mountains, she was trapped in a world completely controlled by Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. Mitchell was not just a kidnapper. In his own mind, he was a prophet. Every day, he preached to Elizabeth about his twisted religion, trying to convince her that God had chosen her to be his spiritual wife. He used fear as his weapon. He'd say, "If you disobey me, I'll kill you. If you try to escape, I'll kill your family." Wanda Barzee stood by his side, enforcing his rules. She controlled Elizabeth's food, punished her for the smallest acts of resistance, and constantly reminded her that escape was impossible. To Elizabeth, Wanda could have been a source of comfort, another woman in the camp, but instead she was an accomplice. Life in captivity was brutal. Elizabeth's identity was stripped away. Mitchell even gave her a new name, demanding she abandon the girl she had always been. Days blurred into nights. The tent they lived in was cold, dirty, and isolated. Every morning, Elizabeth woke up with the same thought. How long can I survive this? But here's what made Elizabeth extraordinary. Even in the darkest moments, she refused to let Mitchell break her spirit. Outwardly, she played along. She obeyed his orders, acted submissive, and pretended to believe his words. But inside, she held on to a silent defiance. She told herself, I will not let him take my soul. I will survive, no matter what. At night, when Mitchell and Wanda slept, Elizabeth would lie awake and think about her family. She pictured her mom's warm hugs, her dad's voice, her siblings' laughter. She prayed silently, clinging to the hope that one day she would be with them again. Those memories became her lifeline, the only thing that kept her strong. Months passed this way. Elizabeth grew weaker physically, but her inner strength only hardened. Mitchell thought he had complete control, but what he didn't know was that the girl in front of him was fighting a quiet, powerful battle of her own. Friends, Elizabeth was living in captivity, but inside her heart, a small flame of hope kept burning, and that flame, though fragile, was impossible to extinguish. Friends, 9 long months had passed since Elizabeth Smart was stolen from her bedroom. 9 months of fear, control, and survival. But sometimes, even in the darkest storms, a small ray of light breaks through. By this time, Mitchell had grown. Bold. He started taking Elizabeth out into public, but always in disguise. Her hair was hidden under a scarf, her clothes were oversized and ragged, and her face often covered. To strangers, she looked nothing like the missing girl on the posters. Mitchell was arrogant. He thought he could walk her right through crowds and no one would ever notice. But Elizabeth noticed something important. Being out in public meant hope. She thought to herself, if just one person recognizes me, I could be saved. And then came the day everything changed. March 2003. Mitchell, Wanda, and Elizabeth walked the streets of Salt Lake City. For Elizabeth, every step felt like a silent prayer. Please, someone see me. Please, someone recognize me, and someone did. A couple spotted her. They looked closely and thought, could this be Elizabeth Smart? They didn't hesitate. They called the police. Soon, officers arrived and confronted the strange trio. Mitchell, confident as always, tried to lie. This is my family, he said. We're travelers. But the police weren't convinced. One officer looked directly at Elizabeth and gently asked, Are you Elizabeth Smart? Imagine her heart at that moment. For 9 months she'd been threatened, told that if she ever spoke the truth, her family would die. She was terrified, but she also knew this was her one chance, her only chance. She took a deep breath and said the words that changed everything. Yes, I am Elizabeth Smart. In that instant, the nightmare ended. Police took Mitchell and Wanda into custody. Elizabeth was placed in safety. Calls were made. And soon, the miracle her family had prayed for finally happened. Elizabeth was reunited with her parents. Her father's voice broke as he said, Our prayers have been answered. Her mother held her so tightly as if she would never let go again. Tears of relief flowed, not just in their home, but across the entire nation. Friends, the world watched, in awe. Against all odds, Elizabeth Smart had been found alive. After 9 months of terror, she was finally free. Friends, Elizabeth Smart was finally free. After 9 months of fear, pain, and survival, she was back in the arms of her family. But her story didn't end there. Now came the fight for justice, and the journey of turning tragedy into strength. Brian. David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee were arrested immediately. At first, the legal process dragged on. Mitchell claimed he was a prophet, that he was insane, that he didn't belong in prison. But Elizabeth's testimony, her courage to face him in court, destroyed those excuses. She told the truth, every painful detail of what he had done. In the end, justice was served. Wanda Barzee was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And Mitchell? He received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He will never walk free again. But what's even more powerful is what Elizabeth did after. Many survivors of trauma struggle in silence, but Elizabeth chose a different path. She refused to let her captors define her. Instead, she stood tall and turned her pain into purpose. She began speaking publicly about her experience. She shared her story not as a victim, but as a survivor. Her words inspired millions. She told children and families everywhere, "No matter how dark your situation feels, never lose hope. You are stronger than you think." Elizabeth also founded the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, dedicated to helping missing and abused children. Through her work, she has brought awareness, education, and support to families facing the unthinkable. She became a voice for the voiceless. The girl who once had her identity stolen now uses her voice to protect others. Think about it, friends. At 14, she was kidnapped. At 15, she was rescued. And today, as an adult, she stands as one of the most inspiring advocates for child safety in America. Her story teaches us something timeless. Even in the darkest prisons, hope can survive. Even when evil tries to silence you, courage can speak louder. Elizabeth Smart's name will forever be remembered, not only as a symbol of tragedy, but as a symbol of resilience, faith, and unbreakable strength. Friends, if one thing can be taken from her journey, it's this. No matter how hopeless life may feel, there is always a way back. Hope is never lost. Friends, Elizabeth Smart's story isn't just about tragedy. It's about courage, hope, and survival. She proved that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can't be broken. If her strength inspired you, remember this. No matter how impossible life feels, there is always hope. Always.